Now, our top story this morning, it was a chaotic day in Parliament following the resignation of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, leaving Liz Truss's leadership teetering on the brink.
So Braverman admitted sending an official document from a personal email account. In a letter to the PM, she said, "I have made a mistake, I accept responsibility, I resign." She further went on to say, "I have concerns about the direction of this government," citing examples of manifesto commitments and differences over immigration policy.
Well, this discord then continued into the evening, where a botched confidence vote on a fracking ban saw accusations that Conservative MPs were being manhandled and bullied into voting with the government.
This vote is counter to what their party manifesto said in 2019, reading, "We will not support fracking unless the science shows categorically that it can be done safely."
Well, let's get some reaction to this all from the political commentator and co-founder of Conservatives Against Racism, Albie Amankona. Good morning to you, Albie. I don't know if you've managed any sleep. I found it hard to tear myself away from social media and the TV screens with all of the scenes unfolding from Parliament yesterday. Running out of adjectives, quite frankly, have had to describe what we've been seeing in recent weeks, but unprecedented pretty much sums it up.
Yes, I mean, I think you got it right, Paul. It has been a very chaotic day in Parliament. I think a very chaotic 6 weeks, if not a very chaotic 2 years, to be quite frank. I think this government is in a moment of profound difficulty, and I think for many people on all sides of the House, I think it's dawning on us that actually this isn't a sustainable way to govern. But the question is, what comes next? There isn't a mechanism to remove a Prime Minister in a very easy way. The Prime Minister would have to resign. The 1922 committee rules state that there's 12 months before a leadership contest can happen. In order for there to be a general election, the Conservative MPs would have to vote in favour of it. I think looking at the polling, that's very unlikely. So a way forward is looking unclear.
Yeah, Desmond Swain, who is absolutely on the right of the Conservative Party, tweeted last night that this was like that moment in Dallas where Bobby Ewing comes out of the shower and he thinks it's all been a dream.
Yes, I saw Desmond's tweet and I was pretty shocked to see that. I mean, look, ultimately, the Prime Minister has to try and get a control of things as quickly as possible. She's appointed Grant Shapps as the Home Secretary to replace Suella Braverman. I think it's pretty unprecedented to see a Prime Minister lose both Chancellor and Home Secretary within less than a week of each other. Pretty shocking scenes. But ultimately, the question is whether or not she can survive until the mid-term fiscal statement on the 31st of October. I think it's looking less likely now than it was at the beginning of this week.
Just explain to people who don't follow Westminster as closely as perhaps we do. We're often, in this Westminster bubble, aren't we? Just the significance, really, of what played out last night, because there was this failed confidence vote, which means that Conservative MPs were expected to vote according to a three-line whip. They had to vote with the government. But then there was a rumour that this was not a confidence vote, and then the chaos unfolded. Just explain why this is important and unusual.
So it's important and unusual because a confidence vote is essentially when a Prime Minister, when a government will say this is a vote, and if you vote against this, you do not have confidence in the government. So if a Tory MP votes against the government in a three-line whip in a confidence vote, it's a very serious matter, and actually it can mean that those MPs lose the whip and therefore they're no longer Conservative MPs. And there was some toing and froing about whether or not it was a confidence vote. I think at 1:33 this morning it came out that it was a confidence vote, and there were some pretty significant backbenchers who voted against it. But look, the government is really in no position to be telling Conservative MPs what to do. There's an attitude of disarray in Parliament in the Conservative Party, and it's not clear to me what the Prime Minister can do to regain the confidence of her backbench MPs.
Yeah, what you're seeing is a fundamental breakdown in party discipline here. There is a complete absence of authority, right? The government is supposed to be governing and it's not. And on the same day that inflation figures come out, 10% inflation, double digits, even more for food inflation. And then they look in the evening, the people of this country see MPs, being manhandled through the voting lobby of the Commons. How does that look for the Conservative Party?
I mean, it looks terrible. There's no bones about it. It is not a good look for the party. It's not a good look for British parliamentary democracy in general. Obviously, often people talk about Britain as the home of Western liberal democracy. We might expect some of the things that have been going on recently to maybe happen in America, as we saw with Trump, or be happening in Italy. But actually, no, this is happening in Britain. And it is really important that the Conservative Party sets this Parliament back on the right path. Whether or not that is with Liz Truss still as leader, I don't know if that's going to be possible, or whether or not we find some sort of unity candidate that can take us forward in the difficult times ahead.
Or what about a period in opposition to then unify? Do you think that could actually be a good thing for the party?
Look, I want the Conservative Party to stay in power. I am a loyal Conservative. That is what I want. But ultimately, it is looking very tricky now to see how we recover from a 30-plus point poll deficit against Labour before the next general election. But, of course, unless the Prime Minister calls a general election and the Conservative MPs vote for one, we're still 2 or 3 years away from a general election. A lot can happen in that time. There's a chance that there's a way forward for Liz Truss, but she's really going to have to make no more mistakes from now on.
Can we talk a little bit more about Suella Braverman? Because there's some suggestion that she might be making a speech today, setting out her position in all of this. Do we really believe that the security breach was significant enough for her to tender her resignation, or was the Prime Minister gunning for her after they reportedly had this 90-minute blazing row the night before on immigration, with the Prime Minister wanting to allow it in to try and promote growth, and Suella Braverman absolutely opposed to that at all costs?
Look, a breach of the ministerial code is a breach of the ministerial code, and a lot of people were criticising Boris Johnson for not handling secretaries of state who broke the ministerial code appropriately when he was in office. If we look back to when Priti Patel was Home Secretary and Boris Johnson was Prime Minister, she broke the ministerial code allegedly, and then Boris Johnson didn't sack her, and there was a big media clamour after that. So one might argue that actually what's happened in this situation is the right thing to have happened. Now, whether or not that is also linked to this disagreement that the two women are believed to have had over immigration rules, we don't know. But ultimately, if a minister breaks a ministerial code, I think it's right that action is taken.
Yeah, but they do have two fundamentally different views of immigration, don't they? Suella Braverman wants to be tough on immigration, saying that's what the party committed to, whereas Liz Truss is saying we need to have, we need to be more relaxed on immigration so we can fill those unfilled vacancies in the economy and fuel growth. And really, that issue has taken a backseat at the moment because of what happened in the Commons, but that is quite a fundamental issue that the Conservative Party is going to have to address.
Absolutely, and I think it actually shows a real big ideological divide within the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
Of course, you've got the more socially conservative side of things, let's say what Suella Braverman represents, where they want less immigration, tighter immigration rules, being tough on illegal immigration. I think that's completely fair enough. But then, of course, on the other side, you've got this drive for growth, and what is one of the biggest things limiting growth in this country is the labour shortage, and also the labour shortage is contributing to that 10.1% inflation figure that we see.
Yeah.
So it is a difficult square to circle when you've got a Conservative Party that wants to go for growth with all means possible, but at the same time keep immigration numbers low. Those two things don't marry together nicely.
But with Jeremy Hunt now as Chancellor and Grant Shapps now as Home Secretary, the centrists very much back in those high offices of state, sharing, presumably, Liz Truss's view on welcoming immigration. We might see a bit of a shift on all of that.
I'm not sure that we will see a shift, actually, because what is important is trying to think about the next general election and how we can win it. Now, it looks very difficult at the moment, but one of the things that I think which will be fundamental to keeping that electoral coalition that we won in 2019 after Brexit is having good control of immigration. And so I think it would probably be wise for this government to perhaps not take such a liberal approach to migration if they wanted to keep those 2019 Conservative voters who wanted tougher controls on migration.
What do you think about some people who think this is a Remainer globalist plot?
I think that's complete nonsense, Paul. I think we've got to really move on from this Brexit, Leave, Remain factions that were in 2016 and move on. It is exactly this kind of factional attitude which is holding the Conservative Party back and has contributed to a lot of the chaos that we've seen, really, since 2016.
Albie Amankona, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And, of course, we want you to be part of the conversation. So much to talk about this morning on Suella Braverman going, on immigration issues, which way the Conservative Party should go. What do you think about the breakdown in party discipline last night in the voting lobby of the House of Commons?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's allegations of it. Jacob Rees-Mogg saying he'd like to see footage that backs that up of manhandling. Big rows, anyway. Lots of backbench MPs coming out saying that they were just absolutely disgusted, weren't they, with the state of affairs, having never seen anything like it in government. Let us know your thoughts this morning.